when you feel betrayed, when you feel down, when somebody stabbed you in the back, you can do one of three things. You can be overcome by your emotions and you can wallow in your self-pity. You can run away from the situation, or you can say, okay, God, I don't understand. I don't like it. I'm hurting, but I trust you. Right, Psalm 55 is where we're at this evening. Psalm 55. I love the Psalms because I feel like that I'm a transparent individual, probably too much, and to my own demise sometimes. Okay, nobody else giggled or even smiled. But anyway, I do feel like sometimes maybe I say too much. I love the Psalms because it's transparent. It's very transparent. You're not, you know what the psalmist is going through. And personally, if I can speak personally, one of the traits that I am the most grateful for, not the most grateful for, but one of the traits that I love in friends, close friends, is the trait of loyalty. To know that no matter what happens, they have my back. That I love that trait in certain friends, and just to kind of, I can't be everywhere at all times, but to know that if I have a true friend and they're with a group of people and some lies begin to get spread, that somebody will speak up and say, that's not right, and I know him, and I know he's... I think that loyalty is in the Bible, and I think we should be loyal to Christ. So I don't think this is some trait, but I value loyalty. I value people that are loyal personally, and I think that, and I want to be a loyal friend. And there is nothing worse than finding out that somebody who you thought was loyal is not loyal. Finding somebody who you think has your back doesn't have your back. And that's the 55th Psalm. Because David had a lot of good friends. David had a lot of close friends. And most of you are familiar with the story where David was the king of Jerusalem, king of Israel. His throne was in Jerusalem. And he had a son named Absalom. And we know that Absalom sat outside the gate for year after year. And he won the favor of the people. He would sit outside the gate, and his people would come out the gate after they get a ruling that maybe they didn't like, and Absalom say, if I was king, I wouldn't have ruled that way, or if I was king, I would have done something different. And he won the heart of the people, and then we know that he rebelled against his dad and tried to overthrow the kingdom. And so David left Jerusalem to spare the city of blood being shed in the city. He wanted to get out of the city. He didn't want a war inside Jerusalem. So he left Jerusalem. And one of David's closest friends was a guy by the name of Ahithophel. It was his closest counselor, one of his more intimate friends. And Ahithophel sided with Absalom. And actually, Ahithophel had some very wise counsel for Absalom that he ended up ignoring. And Ahithophel actually ended up committing suicide when he saw that Absalom wasn't going to do what he was recommending. He went and killed himself because he knew that it was a disastrous decision he was making, because he knew David better than anybody, and he knew how David would respond. He knew what David would do, so he gave Absalom counsel on how to deal with him, and Absalom went with someone else's counsel that actually was basically a spy of David that David had sent back in. And this psalm, though, was written from the heart of David after he has experienced this betrayal by Ahithophel. And that's where a lot of people attribute this psalm to being written by. Now, I don't know if you've ever been betrayed. I'm going to say that you probably have at some point or another. One of the sad realities for me as a pastor is that half of the people that I pastor have been through a divorce. And a lot of those divorces, I would say, have been biblically justified in a sense where, I pastor several men in the church who walked in with their wife having an affair with another man. And They were completely betrayed. I mean, they stood at an altar and they made vows to one another, and they didn't keep the vows. And there's been a lot of guys who have betrayed their mates, and maybe you're sitting in this room tonight and your husband betrayed you, and he had an affair and he walked out on you and he didn't keep his words, and you revealed your heart to him and you gave yourself to him, and you feel betrayed and you feel hurt. Or maybe you've had a friend that you thought had your back, and the friend that was with you and they betrayed you. You can relate to this psalm, okay? This sermon is very, very simple tonight. I don't have 57 points like I had last week. I just have 3 tonight. And there's 3 things that we can do if we have been betrayed. There's 3 choices that we can make, and the psalmist here is wrestling with those choices, okay? The first are found in the first 5 verses. He says in verse 1, "Give ear to my prayer, O God, and do not hide your face from my supplication. Attend to me and hear me. I am restless in my complaint, and I moan noisily. Because of the voice of the enemy, because of the oppression of the wicked, for they bring down trouble upon me, and in wrath they hate me. My heart," now he's speaking personally here, "my heart is severely pained within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fearlessness and trembling have come upon me, and horror has overwhelmed me." So the first thing that the psalmist is expressing here is what he feels as a result of this betrayal. And it really illustrates one of the first things that we can do if we feel betrayal, or not if, but when we experience betrayal. Is one, I can be overcome by the emotion. I can be overcome by the emotions of betrayal. And this is the example of this here, where he is severely, my heart is severely pained within me. He says, fearlessness and trembling have come upon me. And so you guys know what I'm talking about. If you hear news that you weren't expecting to hear, it's like a shot in the gut. Have you ever heard that term before? It's like a shot in the gut. Like I had one of those moments this week where it's just kind of a shot in the gut. I didn't see it coming. It wasn't a cheap shot. I just didn't see it coming. And it was just kind of oh man, and it's just like, I want to go take a nap now, and that tends to be what we want to do when we have trouble. I was watching a show the other day, and it was a documentary, and it was on a fairly famous football coach, and he's a believer, and he's a pretty strong believer. And he was telling a story about how that he was kind of wanting to get everything out of the closet and everything clean in his life, so to speak. And so he was, in his 50s, I think, and he was talking about when he was a young guy, before he knew Christ, he was unsaved, and he was kind of living the lifestyle of an unbeliever, and he was out partying, and he was out, they'd have a football win, and they'd go out and celebrate. And he talked about how that one night he went out to a bar and he got drunk, and he had a one-night stand with this woman. And he goes, I don't know her name. I don't know who she was. I just know that I had this affair. I've never talked to the woman since. I did that one night. And so what he did to kind of come clean, he never told his wife the story. And so he, wanting to come clean and wanting to get things right between him and his wife, he told his wife the story. And this is what he said happened. And I've ever since I heard it, I've been kind of surprised by it. He said his wife got up. They were sitting in the living room. His wife got up. She walked into the bedroom. She shut the door and didn't come out for 1 year. I thought, wow, that's some deep hurt. But what did she feel? She felt betrayed, right? And her emotions overcame her. And for 1 year, she sat in that bedroom and refused to come out. She was overcome by emotion because of this deep betrayal that she felt. Now, I don't want to judge her, and I'm not trying to judge her. I guess in some regard I am, but I think that that's an unhealthy way to necessarily deal with betrayal. But we can do that. So we may not literally go into a room and never come out for a year, but we can do it in our heart. We can do it with people. And this is what the psalmist is wrestling with. Man, I had this friend Ahithophel, and we were close buddies, and we spent a lot of nights talking about things and talking about what God was doing in the kingdom, and now he's totally betrayed me, and now he's with my son, and now he's giving advice against me, and I feel like somebody's punched me in the gut and stabbed me in the back, and he's overcome by this emotion, and this is what he's expressing here. And so I can just let this emotion control me for the rest of my life, or I can do what he talks about in verse number 6. So I said, oh, that I had wings like a dove, I would fly away and be at rest. Boy, you ever thought that? This is honest to God. Karen and I have said this. I shouldn't ever say that, honest to God, like I've been lying to you all the other times. But I'm telling you, Karen and I sometimes, we'll get in the car and she'll go, do you just want to keep going? And I'm like, yes, I do. Do not encourage me. But I have responsibilities and stuff. But, that's what he's saying here in a sense. Oh, that I had wings like a dove, I would fly away and be at rest. Indeed, I would wander far off and remain in the wilderness. So I have three choices. One is I can be overcome by my emotions and stay in this state of despondency and despair for the rest of my life. Or I can run away, number 2. That's the second thing he says. This is what I feel, and this is what I want to do. I can run away. I get it kind of as a leader. I kind of understand it. I get it. I get what he's dealing with here. I do know that the average pastor does not stay at a church very long. 5 years, 4 to 5 years is what the average pastor does, stays at a place. And I think a lot of that, I think there's a majority of that is God is leading a pastor to go somewhere else. So I don't discredit that. God moves people around just like God moves you around and me around. God moves people around. But I do think sometimes being in the pastoral world or being in the ministry, I think that we go through difficult times as pastors. We go through difficult seasons. And the thing to do is just to leave the church we're at because we're tired of the people that we're dealing with and go deal with somebody else. Just run away. It's easier to run away and start fresh than it is to stay and deal with the issues that are there. I mean, that's logically what's in our mind, right? And this is what I think that the psalmist is dealing with here. He goes, I want to run away. I want to just get alone. I want to separate myself from all these people that are in my life right now. I don't like where this is going. I don't like what I feel. And yet people do this all the time. I could let somebody else assume the stresses of leadership. I think a lot of people run away by giving into the temptation. Like I've heard of pastors that have had affairs and knew they were blowing their ministry because it got them out. Like they did it on purpose. They saw it coming, they knew it was going to happen, and they gave into the temptation because this is the thing that would at least this would get me out in a way that's the church would have to make a decision on me to kick me out. That's what people do. But yet how many people run to bars and liquor up to run away? Or they put a needle in their arm to run away, right? They don't want to deal with the betrayal. They've been so hurt by this person that has harmed them that rather than dealing with it, they just want to run from it. And can I just give you a little advice? You can run from your problems, but they have this mysterious way of following you wherever you go. You know? So I can leave this church and go to another church. There's cranky people at that next place too. And there's bitter place at that next place. There's hard people at that next place. And that's just the reality. And I'm not discrediting the fact that God moves us from time to time. I'm not saying that at all. But I think if the mentality is, like I see people do this with marriage a lot. Well, I'm just going to dump her and get a new one. Okay, well, let me tell you, bro. I shouldn't say bro. Let me tell you, man. she's a sinner too. She's got faults too. See, that's the lie of the devil, right? In that we have these affairs because we think that, oh, they're perfect for me. There's no perfect person for you. Well, I didn't really, man, I don't know what I was thinking when I married her, but this will be my true soulmate. And what the issue is what are we doing? We're running away. We're running away. We're running from this reality into a fantasy that we've made in our mind. And then once we get in that fantasy, we find out that that's not a fantasy, it's a reality. And then we run somewhere else. This is how we can deal with betrayal. So somebody betrays us. So how do we deal with it? We can just run from the people that have betrayed us. It's just not a good way to deal with stuff. In a lot of ways, the best way is to stay and deal with whatever we have to face. I love what Jesus said in John 6:66. He says, from that time, many of his disciples went back. You know, remember, Jesus drew great crowds early on. He had a lot of people following him. And then he'd kind of ratchet up his teaching. Like, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. It's like, whoa, what? When are we going to turn to fish and to bread and to feeding 5,000 again? So Jesus starts kind of raising the bar and the disciples start trickling out. From that time, many of his disciples went back and walked with him no more. They ran away. Then Jesus said to the 12, do you also want to go away? You also want to run away? And Peter gave the greatest answer in the Bible, right? Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. Also, we have come to believe and know that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. There was a lot of times where Peter stuck his foot in his mouth. He got that answer right. He got that answer right. And so Peter's like, we're not going to run away. It doesn't matter what happens. We're with you, Lord. So when betrayed, I can do one of three things. One, I can be overcome by the emotion, and I can just wallow in my grief and wallow in my despair. I can run from the person that has brought me the grief and brought me the pain, or I can run from the situation, or I can do the third thing. I can trust God. I can trust God. So verse 8 says, he continues to talk about running away. I would hasten my escape from the windy storm and the tempest. And then we see a little bit of the heart of his prayer here in verse 9. Destroy, O Lord, and divide their tongues, for I've seen violence and strife in the city. Day and night they go around it on its walls. Iniquity and trouble also are in the midst of it. Destruction is in its midst. Oppression and deceit do not depart from its streets. For it is not an enemy who reproaches me, then I could bear it. Nor is it one who hates me, who has exalted himself against me, then I could hide from it. In other words, he's saying, he's talking about how hurt he is. He's like, look, if this was an enemy who hated my guts, I could deal with this. But he says in verse 13, but it was you, a man, my equal, my companion and my acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together and walked to the house of God in the throng. And this is a pretty honest prayer here in verse 15. Let death seize them, let them go down alive into hell, for wickedness is in their dwelling and among them. Now here's where we get to point number 3, verse 16. As for me, okay, this is what I want to do is I want to wallow in my pain. I want to have a pity party. I want to wallow in my pain, and pity parties are parties that nobody wants to come to but you, right? So this is what I can walk around and have a big pity party and feel sorry for myself. This is what I can do because I feel betrayed. Or I can run from the situation. I can escape. Some people escape through suicide. Some people escape through just running away, through walking out the door. This is what I can do with my pain. This is what I can do with my betrayal. Or what David chooses to do is to trust God. As for me, I will call upon the Lord, and the Lord shall save me. Now, this is very important. So what does he do? He feels betrayed, so who's he going to talk to about it? God. right? Now, this is the temptation. When you're betrayed by somebody, the temptation is to run to another human and talk to them about it. There's a word for that in the Bible. It's called gossip. So I can run to somebody else and I can pour all this trash about them, tell somebody else about it. Or I can do what the psalmist did, which is much healthier. Because I don't know about you, but when I gossip, I walk away from the conversation feeling dirty. Like, let me tell you about so-and-so. And then I walk away and I'm like, man, that wasn't right. It's just a dirty... My sin nature craves it and wants to do it. Because if I can put you down, I lift myself up. Let me tell you about so-and-so and what... But look at what I am. What does the psalmist do? He doesn't get with everybody that's left and say, let me tell you about stinking Ahithophel. Instead, what does he do? As for me, I will call upon God, and the Lord shall save me. Now, this is important here. 17, evening and morning and at noon, I will pray and cry aloud. So he is going to devote his the morning time, at noon, and then at evening to prayer. He's going to take his complaint to God. He's going to tell God what's going on in his heart. He's going to cry out to God. And that's what he's saying here. I'm going to call upon God. I'm going to call upon God consistently and persistently. And I'm going to ask God to work in this situation. Why? He has redeemed my soul in peace from the battle that was against me, for there were many against me. God will hear and afflict them, even he who abides from of old, because they do not change, therefore they do not fear God. He believes that God hears his prayer and will give him peace. And I believe that too. I believe when you ask for God's help, he hears you and responds. And I think just like we see in the stories in the Bible where I think of when the disciples got in the boat with Jesus and they're going to go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. They did that multiple times, did they not? They kind of got in these storms. And in Mark, we see where the disciples woke Jesus up and Jesus stood up and said, peace be still. He calmed the storm. But then there was other times where he just stayed with them through the storm. I think of Peter. Remember Peter walking on the water and he began to sink and he cried out for Jesus' help and Jesus rescued him, got him back in the boat, saved him from sinking. I think that's what the psalmist is doing here. He's saying, God, please, I believe that God's going to save me. See, I believe that he is at work in this situation and that God can make beautiful things come out of very ugly things. Do you believe that? Verse 20, he has put forth his hand against those who were at peace with him. He has broken his covenant. The words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords. And this is a great verse. And if you're kind of feel betrayed, you should think of this verse. 22, cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He shall never permit the righteous to be moved. It's so neat to me that on Sunday morning, we're walking through Luke, and we're right at the crucifixion. And what did we talk about this morning? Jesus was betrayed. Was he not? Jesus was betrayed. He was betrayed by the religious leaders. He was betrayed by Pilate, who knew he was an innocent man and still allowed him to be executed. He was betrayed by his disciples. And yet Jesus suffered betrayal and rejection patiently to save us. If he did that for us, we can endure betrayals patiently, trusting in him. Because God will work this thing out to his good. So Not a lot of points and not a lot of maybe thought tonight, but I think some good things to think about as we leave. We have a choice. You have a choice. When you feel betrayed, when you feel down, when somebody stabbed you in the back, when somebody's turned on you, when somebody has betrayed you, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a friend, whether it's a child, whether it's a parent, whether it's a neighbor, whether it's a pastor, whoever it is, you can do one of three things. You can be overcome by your emotions and you can wallow in your self-pity. You can run away from the situation. You can get wings and fly away. Or you can say, okay, God, I don't understand. I don't like it. I'm hurting, but I trust you. That's life. I'm going to say of the three options, the third one is the best way. Just to trust God. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to happen in your life, and they're going to happen in my life that make no sense. None. And God doesn't owe me an explanation. God's God and I'm not. Okay, so there's a lot of things that happen in our lives and they don't make any sense to us and we don't understand. I just choose, and I think we all should just choose to trust God. Just trust Him. Just say, okay, God, I don't understand and I'm hurt by this, but I'm going to choose to trust you that you know what's best. And I just think that's the best way. So this is a good psalm for us to meditate on and think about, and maybe this is a good thing for you just to kind of dwell on this week. Because you're going to have people betray you. You're going to have people stab you in the back. You're going to have people think we're with you, and you find out they weren't with you. But keep looking to Jesus. Keep looking to Jesus.